What's up everyone, you're watching a Montu Motors video, and today we're going to talk about the Nissan Fairlady or the Nissan Z-car series. The Nissan Z-car series was built in Japan from 1969 until present, with a short hiatus from 2000 until 2002. It was built in 3 different plants in Japan, including the plant at Kanagawa, the plant in Opama, and that's with 2 P's as in Papa, not a B as in Bravo, not to be confused with our former president. This is not the Obama factory. And the last factory was in Tochigi, Japan. The Z-cars were built as a 2+2 or as a 2-seater only, and is a front-engine rear-wheel drive layout. Every single Z-car from the first one built until today all used a version of a 6-cylinder motor. So to get started, we have 6 models we're going to cover, starting with the S30 240Z, the S130 280ZX, the Z31 300ZX, the Z32 300ZX, the Z33 350Z, and the Z34 370Z. So let's get started with the S30 240Z. The S30 240Z was released in October 1969 for the 1970 model year. It was sold in the Japanese market and the US market, and it used 3 different versions of an inline 6. The first one, in Japan, was a 2-liter single overhead cam inline 6 called the L20A, which produced 130 horsepower. The US market 240Zs received the L24, which was a 2.4-liter inline 6 with twin Hitachi carburetors, and it produced 151 horsepower. This is a rare occasion where the American market car produced more power than the Japanese market car. However, a third Z, released in Japan, was called the PS30 or the Z432, 432 standing for 4 valves, 3 carburetors, and 2 camshafts, used a version of the S20 which was used in the original Skyline GTR, which was a 2-liter double overhead cam motor, and it produced 160 horsepower. In 1974, Nissan released the 260Z. The displacement was up to 2.6 liter and was available now as a 2+2 instead of just a 2-seater only. Even though the displacement on this motor was increased, the power was actually decreased to 139 horsepower. The reason being is US emissions regulations got much stricter, so there were new camshafts, carburetors, and a lower compression ratio. However, in the other export regions, the power was up to 154 horsepower. Finally, in 1975, in North America only, they released the 280Z. This is technically a separate car from the 280ZX, the S130, as this is still considered an S30, so it's the original generation. The displacement was increased to 2.8 liters. One of the biggest changes with this motor compared to past motors was the introduction of fuel injection courtesy of Bosch. This replaced all of the carburetors in previous motors. Power increased to 170, which was the highest horsepower created from a factory S30Z car. However, the weight increased as well, thanks to a lot of luxury features being added, as well as a front bumper that was designed to comply with US crash regulations. Markets outside of North America continued to use the 260Z until the 280ZX, or the S130, came out at the end of 1978. In late 1978, Nissan released their S130 280ZX. This car was born during a time where cars, even like the mighty Corvette, were relegated to such a status where they should nearly be wearing thick Coke bottle glasses and a pocket protector. As such, the L28 that came over from the previous 280Z produced a paltry 135 horsepower. Nissan, however, was not going to be bent over a barrel, and they decided to build a turbocharged version of this model, and it produced a respectable 180 horsepower. They coupled this to a 3-speed automatic or a 5-speed manual. The S130 280Z also saw another first, the T-top, and mullets everywhere rejoiced. Although many claim this is the best of both worlds, with more rigidity that you would get in a true coupe, and the open-air experience. I personally hear leaks when I think of T-tops. The S130 280Z also saw a 10th anniversary edition, which featured gold emblems, gold alloy wheels, and a 2-tone paint scheme, which came in either gold or red and black. They also featured leather seats, headlight washers, and an automatic climate control. As the 280ZX evolved into the Z31 300ZX, a couple of things evolved with it. First, the styling. Out went the ripped off by Jaguar E-Type styling that was present in the 240Z and 280ZX to an extent, and in came styling in true 1980s fashion, styling by doorstop. And this little wedge was also the first Z-car to use a V6 engine instead of an inline 6. The first was the VG30E, which was a naturally aspirated V6 producing 160 horsepower. The second was the VG30 ET, which did phone home and also used a turbocharger, helping it produce 200 horsepower. However, some markets outside the US could be had with a version that produced up to 228 horsepower, courtesy of a longer cam duration and less emissions restrictions. Thanks, emissions. In 1984, Nissan also released a 50th anniversary edition of the 300ZX. Many of you are probably doing mental math in your head now to figure out how from 1969 to 1984 they came up with 50 years. This was actually the 50th anniversary of the company, not the car. This model was based on the 300ZX Turbo, but was outfitted with every single luxury feature, and also came with a unique black interior, which added Bodysonic leather. Bodysonic sounds like a futuristic, hands-free, happy ending massage. And to shift that image out of your brain, something cool came in 1985, where Nissan decided to drop the Datsun brand name for good. And stay out! Nissan soon realized that this doorstop-inspired wedge was starting to look kind of aged in its aesthetics. So in 1987, it decided to add restyled front and rear bumpers, as well as new headlights and taillights. Turbo models that came out in 1987 also came with a special smoked turbofin wheel set. Ooh. And in 1987, they also upgraded the manual transmission, added larger brakes, and turbo cars from 1987 also came equipped with a clutch type LSD. In 1988, the turbocharger was switched from a Garrett T3 to a T25 turbo. Any second-gen Eclipse GST owners out there? And the compression ratio was switched from 7.8 to 1 to 8.3 to 1. 1988 also saw another special edition called the Shiro Special, which was available in pearl white. For those of you who don't know, Shiro means white in Japanese. The Z31-300ZX was produced all the way up until 1989, where it was replaced by its successor. And that successor was the Z32-300ZX. The 3-liter V6 carried over, however, it was now outfitted with dual overhead camshafts and variable valve timing, so the naturally aspirated version produced 222 horsepower. Nissan really gave us the good news in the form of the turbo version, which now had twin Garrett turbochargers and dual intercoolers. This meant it was good for 300 horsepower. As 1989 also coincided with the Japanese gentleman's agreement, this would soon be limited to 276. That way, they weren't playing unfairly. And the Z32-300ZX became a huge success. Motor Trend called it their import car of the year in 1990, and Road and Track and Car and Driver added this car to their 10 best lists. And why shouldn't they have? This car was a super modern, completely redesigned version of the Z-car, which was already a popular car. And it had a lot more features to make this car even better than its previous generation. Similar to the Nissan Skyline, you also got the Super Hike Assist system on the 300ZX now as well. With twin turbochargers, plenty of power was available to make this car a serious competitor in the sports car market. But all these features and technology and all this stuff made for a relatively cramped engine bay. However, everything fit in there perfectly. Perhaps a bit too perfectly. As I've heard from many people who have owned the Z32-300ZX, that these things can be kind of a pain to work on sometimes. And, especially true with heavily modified cars, you spend a lot of time working on them. But, again, from many people I have known, I just hear that the reliability later in their lives has suffered. Oh, and also to mullet sporters, there's some good news. All Z32-300ZXs were now featuring T-tops as standard. There was also another version of the hardtop, a rare version, which was known as a slick top. I think this means you have to frequently wax it to keep the hair pulled back to the rear. But I could be wrong. The Z32-300ZX was produced in America all the way up until 1997, where afterwards it would have a short hiatus until we saw another Z-car. During this hiatus, the French car manufacturer Renault bought nearly half of Nissan in 1999. The new CEO claimed that we would build the Z and we will make it profitable. In the summer of 2002, they released the Z33-350Z. This car was completely changed from any prior generation of the Z-car, and now used their new version of the V6, which was a 3.5-liter VQ35DE, which was a dual overhead cam V6. This motor was used in many cars in Nissan and also Infiniti, including the G35, or as it was called in Japan, the Skyline. I personally hate that they called that the Skyline in Japan. Originally, this motor produced 287 horsepower and 274 pound-feet of torque, and saw an increase in 2005 up to 300 horsepower. There were many different trim packages available in the 350Z: the base, the enthusiast, the performance, the touring, and the track. Z33 350Zs came coupled with a 6-speed manual gearbox or a 5-speed automatic. The automatics actually lost 13 horsepower, so therefore if you had the automatic, you're slow. The base model 350Zs did not also receive limited slip differentials or a traction control system. Some might think that's a plus, myself included. Some of the higher trim packages, such as the touring model, could also receive luxury features such as leather seats and a Bose entertainment system, as well as satellite navigation and VDC, which was Nissan's vehicle dynamic control. Track models could receive things such as Brembo brakes, and in 2007, this version was dropped in favor of the Nismo edition, which received an entirely redesigned ground effects kit and Ray's engineering wheels. The Nismo edition also had revised camshafts, a Nismo sport-tuned exhaust, and a new Brembo brake system, which had 4-piston front calipers and 2-piston rear calipers. In 2007 and 2008, all 350Z's VQ35 HRs were now increased to 306 horsepower, courtesy of dual intakes and a 7,500 RPM redline, up from 7,000. For the 2009 model year, Nissan released the Z34 370Z. This car is currently still in production and, as of 2017, probably in need of an update. Just saying, Nissan. When this car was new, it came out with Nissan's VQ37 VHS. Wait, no, VHR. This was a 3.7-liter V6 and could produce anywhere from 328 to 350 horsepower depending on your market. The Z34 370Z also came with 2 new transmissions, a 6-speed manual gearbox that came with a feature I'll talk about in a minute, or a 7-speed automatic that came with paddle shifters so we could all feel like Michael Schumacher. However, an interesting thing is the 6-speed manual. It came with a piece of technology that Nissan calls Synchro Rev Match. Essentially what this does, say you're in 3rd gear and you need to be in 2nd gear, but you don't know how to heel and toe downshift. There's a sensor in the actual slot where the gear lever goes into that reads when you're going into a lower gear and automatically blips the throttle to simulate a heel and toe downshift. What this also means is those of us who have spent years perfecting our technique can now try to be outdone by a stupid computer. Damn you, technology. However, this was a good safety feature for those who don't know how to heel and toe downshift, as you're now not just sliding it into a lower gear and just releasing the clutch, causing a lot of wear and tear on your transmission and engine as well. So there is a positive to it. 8 years into its production run, all of these components are still being utilized for the newest model year. Nissan's given us 2 different versions of the Nismo as well, with the latest iteration being actually a sharp looking car. Comes with cool red accents to kind of differentiate it from the previous Nismo edition, new wheels, and a pretty sharp looking red interior. That being said, this is the final Z-car that Nissan has produced, and we're all kind of curious to see what they're going to do next. Will it be a 400Z? Maybe something involving forced induction? Anything with all-wheel drive? Who knows? Maybe they'll try to make a baby version of the GTR. We all sit and wait until the next Z-car is produced. We hope you guys enjoyed this video today and learned a lot about Nissan Z-cars. If you're interested in importing a Z32 or older, as these are the current ones that are able to be legally imported, you can always hit us up at sales@montumotors.com. Again, thank you for watching this video, and have a good one.
Recommend Montu Motors.
And I would definitely go through Montu Motors again and again.
Registration, insurance, all that stuff, but at the end of the day, they took care of every fear you could possibly have. They'll be able to answer it right on the spot.
That was a ridiculously simple process for getting a JDM car.
I couldn't be happier with my purchase from Montu Motors.